Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Public Services Scrutiny Committee. Have we, first of all, is everybody in the meeting? I'm just looking at Francis. Francis, are you in the meeting? No. Okay. All right. Okay. Right. First of all, on the agenda, apologies for absent. So we got any apologies for absent, Hazel?
No, we don't.
That's
I am here. I was just, well, there was nobody there. I was just
having your breakfast. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Brilliant. So there are none. Declarations of interest. Has anybody got any conflicts of interest? Any? There are any declarations? No. So public open forum. I can't see anybody at the back of the meeting. And we've got no kind of invites really, or we've got no kind of emails to suggest that anybody wants to facilitate or participate, I should say, in this meeting online. So further on the agenda, then we've got number 4. So we've got highways responsibilities and funding, and to provide an overall on the funding for highways, the responsibilities of the council, South Trunk Road Agency, Sutra, and others. So discussion on the issues raised by members in relation to the M48, the A466 and the 27 bridges. So that's pretty clear. We're very lucky to have Carl Tuig here today. I know he's a fan's favourite, if I can say that, with members. So I'm just trying to lighten the mood, really. So have we got any questions?
Do some slides.
He's going to do some slides, but have we got any from the outset, based on what I've just basically told you what we're looking at today, are there any questions from members before Carl gets stuck into his PowerPoint presentation? No? Carl, the floor is yours.
Oh, can I do it like that?
That's it.
There we are. Great. Morning, councillors. I'm not sure about the fans' favourite. Felt more like lamb to slaughter then, but we'll try and go through it together. So I've been asked to do a bit on Sutra, their responsibilities, what our responsibilities are within Sutra, and a bit of an highways overview of where we currently are. From the outset, I would say that we've awaiting news of funding from Welsh Government, so I can't tell you where we are completely, but I will try and cover off what the next stages are when we know what our funding position is. So for many councillors ask, what is the new setup? Many of you will be aware that Paul Keeble left in September. Some of you may not. We're not the best at sharing news when officers leave, and I know how confusing that can be. So I'm head of neighbourhood services. From the highways perspective, Steve Lane is now fronting up the whole of the highways section. So he's got the ops side with Andrew Church and Mark Watkins. He's got Rob Davis in design team, Sue-Ann Sanford doing asset, and Graham Kinsella doing traffic road safety. Ross, Price, flooding, and Mark Davis, highways development, have gone over to Craig O'Connor. And then on the other part of highways, Gareth Sage, he looks after Sutra and street lighting. So we've got Rhys Paul, who's leading on the Sutra side with Gareth, and then Paul Stone, who's leading on the lighting side. The other bits you'll be more aware of: Laura Carter in waste, Nigel Levy in grounds and cleansing, and during the restructure in October, I'm also looking after Ian Ockham, albeit Deb is doing the vast majority of that job at the moment while I try and sort out highways. So the Trunk Road Agency, Sutra and Namutra, so it's South Wales and North and Mid Wales. Trunk Road Agency, they have the responsibility for maintaining the trunk road across Wales. They're both trunk road agents working on behalf of Welsh Government. In the South Wales area, we cover as far down as Pembroke, and up to Chepstow, and then across the edge of the valley road. So Monmouthshire covers down to Corriton roundabout, Corriton in Cardiff. Neath Port Talbot cover Corriton out to Carmarthen, and then Carmarthen cover Carmarthen into Pembrokeshire. So that's the three councils that work for the Trunk Road Agency, and then we put work out to Cardiff, work for us as a subcontractor, and Pembrokeshire work for Carmarthen as a subcontractor. So the services, so Gareth Sage is my manager for Sutra. They cover the work, all of the maintenance work. They don't decide what roads are going to be resurfaced. They don't decide what bridges are going to be built. It's not that kind of work. It is literally the maintenance work that they carry out on our behalf, or on Welsh Government's behalf, in a contract with us. So it's a full cost recovery with overheads, and there's some additional money then to help to pay towards depots that we share space with, and some other stuff that we share in terms with them. So it's a cost benefit to Monmouthshire Council, but it is another arm that needs to be managed within the council, and it is largely, the workload is largely dictated by Sutra and Welsh Government. So that's their responsibilities: maintain the network, gully sucking, drainage works, the VRS barrier system in the central reservations. We do that work. We obviously deal with the emergency response to incidents, accidents, flooding, winter maintenance, all of those kind of issues on the trunk road. So that's the motorways and many of the A roads. They do the verge mowing, and while they do the verge mowing, they do litter picking, but it's the local authorities that have the responsibility for picking litter on the trunk roads. It's an area.
Sorry, Carl, what's VRS, please?
It's the vehicle restraining system. Sorry, I should have put that in. And I should have said before, I'm happy for you just to step in and question me as I'm going. I'm more used to that, so feel free, just fire questions as I go in. I do know how fast I talk, so yeah. And I will plough through these otherwise. So one of the main issues for us is litter on the trunk roads. It's very difficult to clear litter on a trunk road. We don't have responsibility for the motorway, but all the other trunk roads we do. And because they're fast roads, by definition, it's very difficult for us to go on and just litter pick on the side. We need traffic management in place to do that work on. And that's a stipulation from Sutra and Welsh Government, that we have to have traffic management systems in place if we're on their road. That traffic management costs a huge amount of money, and even if we had the money, we have to ask them, can we close their road to do litter picking? And the network is so impacted and slowed down when you're litter picking that any other work going on the network, on the local network, means that we're told that we can't be on there. So we try and bounce on the back of maintenance work that Gareth is doing. We're very lucky that I have Gareth and Nigel both working for me. They work closely together. When Gareth has got maintenance work in, Nigel tries to get in and do some litter picking at the same time. But it's a very difficult situation. Previously, the verge mowing would have been 3, sometimes 4 times a year. It's now once a year. Excellent for nature, biodiversity, terrible for litter. So they collect the litter once a year now. They do a safety cut as well, where they collect the litter on the roundabouts and approach road verges, but the rest of it just gets left. And over a year, that builds up to a lot of litter with people throwing it out. In Wales, we don't have legislation where we can prosecute car drivers for throwing litter. So it makes it very difficult to enforce, and also makes it very difficult to clean. So we're constantly working with Sutra. I spent many years trying to push the responsibility back onto them. I've given up. I've accepted that it's something we've got to do. And we'll move forward with that, trying to jump on the back of other closures to try and save us money. that was a little bit on the background of Sutra, and I know that there was some more questions around what work we do, particularly for the Chepstow area around the closures of the bridges, and the Caldicot area for the closures of the bridges, and the impact then on the rest of the network. We don't get a lot of say in what happens on the motorway work, what happens on resurfacing. It's been a hit and miss relationship with Welsh Government and Sutra for many years. Over the last 2 years since the slip at Leys Bend and the work with National Highways, our relationships are much better. So relationships with National Highways and Sutra are probably the best they've ever been. So we are starting monthly meetings with Sutra, so that they bring us up to speed of what they're doing, all the works across the network, and then we can feed out to members and residents what work we think is going to impact them. They do have a very good communication website, but it's not fed into our website. So this piece of work with them now will hopefully flag up when I will know when the Prince of Wales Bridge is going to be closed. I will know when other roads are going to be closed that are likely to impact Caldicot. I'll know when, I already know now when the Ardwick roundabout closures were happening, so we were able to programme other works around it. So it's a lot better position than it was, but it's far from perfect because you've got several different people managing roads and network, and everybody wants to close roads to fix them or close roads for ripping them up to put gas and electric through them. So it's a difficult juggling job to keep everything moving as people want. I'll run through a little bit of county highways stuff, so that's Steve Lane's part of the world. On what we do, as I said, we haven't had the clearance of the funding yet, so it's quite difficult to plan what the actual projects are going to look like next year. We put the local government borrowing initiative. I was checking with Deb then sat next to me. So it's the local government borrowing initiative. We put that bid in on Friday, so it's unlikely we're going to know about that for another few weeks. And then the plan is to do a members' workshop, invite all members. We'll know what funding we've got at that point. We'll know the work that we're doing in the next year. We'll have an idea of the year after, and we'll sit and go through all of that level of detail at that meeting. But I'll try and cover off some generic stuff at this meeting, and then feel free fire as many questions. And if I haven't caught the principle of what you wanted to speak about, don't worry that it's not on the slides. Don't worry that you've got to question me on the slides. Just fire questions at me on anything. And if I can answer, I will. If I can't, I'll go out and gather the answers. So the risk versus the budget for the highway network. Obviously, safety is our primary concern on the network. The financial restraints that we work in is clearly a restraint for us. And then the reputational risk. And it's the reputational risk where most of you will have your inboxes filled from. The state of the roads, the lack of maintenance, the number of potholes, whatever it is. I do appreciate that you are on the front line of receiving complaints from residents and then pushing them back to us. And we're not always able to do as much as we'd like to do, or certainly as quickly as we'd like to do it. So funding's been in steady decline since austerity. This is a UK-wide issue. It's not we haven't got a monopoly on that. It's a problem across the UK. To give an idea of the scale of the maintenance issue for us as a county, Sutra. So Gareth's team is a similar size to Steve's, have a similar budget. They maintain 160 kilometres of road. Steve has to maintain 1,600 kilometres of road. So, Welsh Government have, in theory, putting 10 times more into the budget pot for maintenance than we have available. I appreciate their roads are much heavier used, but even with that heavier use, you can see the scale of the problem. We've the same number of drains, the same number of gullies, the same number of potholes appearing, so it's a lot of work. We manage the budget positively. We very, very rarely come back at the end of the year asking for more money. From from a highways perspective, that's really good budget management, but from a public perspective, it's negative expectation management, because we are having to say no. We have to say no to lots of work to manage our budget positively, or else we will, there could be a bottomless pit of spend within a year. So it is managing that budget as positively as we can, but I do recognise that isn't always favourable for members or residents, and that's understandable. So many of you will have heard about the brag list. That's black, red, amber, green. The reds were so bad we created a different colour, and that's why we've got black. We understand the funding challenges that highways are up against. The prioritising of that funding is far more complex. There is no perfect system for prioritisation. Every road, particularly every road that has a resident living on it, is their priority. And I understand that. If they live on a road that's got potholes on it, that's their main concern. But we have to take a network view. We have to look across the county, we have to look across how all of our roads fit in, how they all join into other communities, and that's how we start to prioritise the roads. So we do we did the last GACE survey in 2022, so that data is quite old now. Lots of roads deteriorate at different rates, so we're redoing the new GACE survey has just been completed, and we should have that information by the end of May.
What is a GACE survey?
I was hoping nobody would ask me that, because I haven't got a clue what it stands for. I'll look it up on Google now. Deb's doing the honours and looking it up on Google. It's more or less an automated investigation of the road network. There's cameras on the bottom of a car. They drive across the network and tell you whether the road is pitted, potholed. They take photos then. So we have the whole network mapped. And this year they're going to do all the footpaths as well. So they'll see the encroachment of grass on the pavements and all of those other things it'll pick up as well. So it's a very, very comprehensive view of the state of the network. What it doesn't do is it prioritises those roads into red, amber, green. What it doesn't do is prioritise our roads for us as a council. So all it will say is that road is worse than that road. But if the worst road has only got one person living on it, and it's a country lane with very, very little traffic, it is not as important as another road with a school, an hospital, a surgery, and a lot of other facilities on it. So we then have to do that prioritisation after that. And that's built on the road usage data, the facilities it serves, the number of accidents, the number of claims, the number of complaints. There's a lot of other things that go on top of the GACE survey to give us our prioritisation. So the black, red, amber, green in simple terms is black is the network prioritised for works next year, the next financial year. Red is the network in need of works but can hopefully last for another year. Amber is the roads beginning to show some levels of deterioration, and praying that we don't have too many bad winters by the time we get to them. And then the green list is the last few years of the black list. They've been done, they've been fixed. A road will last for up to 10 years before it needs intervention again. So we know that the last, between years 8 and years 10, those roads are starting to go into the amber, the very bottom of the amber list. And then obviously as the years go on, they will become worse. In an ideal world, you'd resurface a road, 10, 15 years later, you'd resurface it with a coarse dressing, make it last another 10 years. We haven't been able to do that. So lots of our roads are coming out of amber into red and needing more work. We recognise that the stitching time saves 9, but you've got to have that budget to do that. And we just don't have the budget to keep on top of this work. Which brings me to the LGBI funding element announcement from Welsh Government, which sounds great, £120 million to improve the network. When you share that out amongst Wales, we get just over £3.5 million to do our network. To keep Monmouthshire's network at a steady state, so no improvements, but just not letting it decline any further, we estimate somewhere between 4.1 and 4.8 million a year. And that's a good estimate. The new GACE survey will give us an even better view on that, and my fear is it's probably gone up in the last 3 to 4 years. So we are a long way. This funding is the equivalent of less than a year's funding need for us to keep a steady state. When you add it on top of the budget that we already spend, which is also less than a steady state, it makes some difference, but it's not going to make the difference that the people want. People expect when they hear £120 million. So it's reasonably safe to say that the public will expect new tar on every road. I would, if I'd seen the headline 120 million, that's what I'd be expecting. I drive on the roads, I cycle on the roads. I'd like to see the roads in a better state as well. So, I understand the public view of it. We know that we've pushed some schemes through that may not progress as fast. The Leys Bend work up in Monmouth, there was a slip just outside of the Welsh border on the English side of Monmouth. That work was put on hold because of concerns that there may be dormice in the slip itself. Dormice might have gone into the slip itself, and that's put at least 6 months onto that job. So it doesn't take a lot, and I'm fully thing with the ecology of it, and I wouldn't want to see dormice displaced either. But it is a difficult thing for us when badgers, otters, dormice, bats and a lot of other species require special measures before we can go in and do work, and that adds a lot of time to our programs. So we've put in a program of work to Welsh Government to draw down this funding. We know that not all projects will go through as quickly as we'd like, so we will push Welsh Government funding into doing jobs that we know we can achieve in a year, because that funding is for a year. And if there's other works then that need to be slipped, we'll make sure that's out of our own capital. So we will definitely be spending the Welsh Government's LGPI money this year. The construction market is fragile, to say the least, at the moment. Huge amount of shift over the last 4 years in costs. Many of the big contracts were signed more than 4 years ago, and the contractors now are struggling, challenged with the budgets that they put into the original tenders that they can't achieve now 4 years on, with 25-30% rises in construction costs. So it is a difficult market at the moment. If we're going out to tender and 22 local authorities in Wales will have a share of £120 million. So we'll all be going out to the same people for the same types of work, and my concern is that Monmouth isn't big enough and our projects won't be big enough to attract the bigger players. So we'll be in a very small pool of contractors able to do some of that work for us. So we're hoping we can do a lot of it internally with our own workforce, but that's also stretched. If I take all of my workforce and put a new tar down, that sounds great, except there won't be any other works being done, drainage, factoring, winter maintenance, anything else, and we can't do that. So it's a fragile market at the moment. And from a officer perspective, and this is difficult for residents to understand, the money doesn't all go on new tar. A lot of the money goes into the design, the ecology, the tendering process, the traffic management, the expectation management. So, when you think of £120 million in new tar, it would go a long way. When you start to build in all the other costs of tendering and ecology and the design of these works and monitoring of these works, it doesn't go as far as any of us would like to think. And then I'm open for questions.
Okay, no, thank you, Carl. Have we got a list up of questions already? First of all, we had a kind of email to say that Councillor Howells is not in attendance today, so let that be noted. Also, Carl said at the beginning of his intro that Paul Keeble had left the authority, and unfortunately we don't necessarily get wind of that unless it's a very senior officer, but I always thought Paul was a very senior officer. But I'd like to say that this committee thanks Paul for his dedication and work commitment to this authority. He's been with us had been with us for probably 30 years, I think, or close to that. And he was well liked, well respected, very deferential, proper old school officer. So we're sad to see him go. I saw Paul a little while ago when I was out walking a dog, so he told me that he'd retired. So I'm sure the committee would, also like me to say that we thank him for his dedication and commitment and wish him well in his retirement. So let that be noted. Have we got any questions? Francis, you're first up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your presentation, Carl. That's very expansive. I've got a couple of questions. And actually, one thing I did want to note is I'm really delighted to hear you say that you note that it's often members that are on the front line of having these queries and questions from members of the public. And I think it is helpful for us to be aware of, what is likely, what is possible. I mean, as you say, I don't always think members of the public expectations are perhaps in tune with some of the constraints that the authority might face. But of course, I think one of the things that is kind of difficult for us is we don't often get the information about how roads are classified. I know, appreciate that's but I think that's kind of helpful in trying to explain to members of the public, in maintenance terms, whether that is likely to see the light of day before I start drawing my pension or not, whether there's likely to be any in maintenance on it. But just a couple of questions which are really focused around kind of Sutra a bit and our relationship with them. Generic questions, Sutra and Welsh Government really, not specifically focused on our local areas. And then just a couple of questions about the running of the highways team, because I have to say, I think I find it quite difficult to work out who's responsible for what, but that's really helpful, your little graph. So in terms of the roads that we're responsible for and then the roads that Sutra are responsible for. So my understanding, perhaps because of the title, is that Sutra are responsible for trunk road maintenance, etc. And a trunk road, perhaps I'm, I kind of not, but I would have thought those were generally kind of your A roads, but I could be wrong in that. And I think I'd mentioned to you, I don't want to specifically talk about particular roads, but what I didn't understand was how, because I've asked them, for example, about particular roads, which are A roads, which don't seem to be their responsibility. So I wanted to ask, so one question is, how is their responsibility determined, if you like? So I gather that they're not responsible for some roads. And they sent me a map, I think, and for example, the A4810 isn't on it. So how are those responsibilities worked out? And then secondly, you talked about the way in which obviously litter is the responsibility of the authority. And of course, there's what's the word? Traffic management required, for litter picking. But in the general terms, when you talk about Sutra doing safety cuts, I don't see them litter picking there either. It looks even worse once they've done a safety cut often, because they just chew up all the litter that's there. So if the understanding is that when they're doing those safety cuts, they should also be getting rid of the litter or any debris that's there, that's what I understood you to say, we should at least be seeing that regularly done if they're safety cuts, I presume. That'd be my second question. And then thirdly, what is our workforce, our direct labour workforce at the moment in highways? I would be interested to know that. And finally, what is the sort of annual spend that we send out to contractors in highways? So that the 4 questions there. Thank you.
I'll do my best. Sorry, I had the sound on the laptop, not on the speaker. I'll do my best to answer them all. The allocation of trunk roads is more complex than I care to understand, of why they've chosen some roads, the A48 not being one of them, but the A48 from High Beach down through Chepstow is one. I think it's to do with the links to the motorway, and then links into their own system. So the road coming from Cwmbran or Pontypool up to Abergavenny is a Sutra road. And then you've got the A road that isn't a Sutra road. So I'm not fully understanding how the allocation was done in the beginning, but I think it's linked to the motorway system. But I'll try and find a better answer than that for you, but I've struggled with it as well, of why that certain allocation is. The verge mowing, so they used to do 3 or 4 complete mows, which included the safety cuts. They've moved to 1 mow or 1 verge cut per year to keep on top of the growth, and then they do the safety splays once, sometimes twice a year, depending on growth. They should litter pick at the same time. I'm conscious as well that doesn't always happen, and we're left then with shredded litter that looks even worse than litter hidden under overgrowth. And sometimes they do litter pick, but the litter is that embedded in the overgrowth over the last 3 to 4 months that they couldn't have got it, and when they go over with a mower, then it just shreds it all up, and they don't go back and litter pick then. So litter picking is normally done before they mow rather than after they mow for obvious reasons, but they don't come back then and pick it up. So we constantly going back and forth with Sutra, asking them can they do a little bit more on that. The legislation, EPA 1990, says that the local authorities have responsibility for litter clearance on the trunk roads, although I would see litter picking as a maintenance issue. And I've always argued that with Welsh Government. The last 20 years that I've been in local authority, I've argued that it's a maintenance issue. They need to keep the litter down so that they can keep their roads moving and doesn't block drains and everything else. And obviously then we haven't got the money for traffic management on those roads either. So it is a constant battle with us. I'm hoping at some point they will take responsibility, but it is set in legislation, EPA 1990, that it is our responsibility. Spend on external contractors from a county perspective is quite low. I'll get you the actual figure, but it's relatively low of the work we do. We bring in some teams when we are really struggling through local companies, and we pull them out. Mostly we pull them out with our own teams to give us an hand on potholing and all. There are the bigger works. So from a maintenance perspective, it's relatively low. The bigger pieces of work is quite a large chunk of our money. The Y Bridge resurfacing is going to be circa $500,000. That is going to an external company. We don't have the workforce to do those large projects. So I'll get you the figures, but I'll make a split in what there is maintenance compared to capital type works, because capital works is a big chunk going out externally from us. And the last question was
Size of our workforce.
Size of our workforce.
Direct
yes.
Workforce
So
in highways. Thank you, Carl.
So within the maintenance side of it, we've got about 30 operatives. So we work on the need for 24 operatives, 12 north, 12 south, and that gives us our coverage of the winter maintenance and all of the tasks that we do. So vectoring, sweeping, 2 out on tarmacking, all of those things, and it adds up to them numbers. Back office is probably about 10, 12 people in the maintenance side of it. and there's probably around 40 other people then doing all of the other jobs within highways. I'll give you accurate figures, but that's the kind of numbers we're looking at. It's around 30 operatives out on the front line doing work. For Sutra then it's probably more like 40 out on the front and less in the back office, because a lot of the back office function is Welsh Government as opposed to being local authority. So it's a similar size workforce. It's roughly around the sort of £3 million mark. Steve's workforce, we split out the fleet side of it several years ago, so I haven't got an accurate figure for fleet now, but it's around that sort of £3 to £4 million spend, and then Sutra is around £5 million spend, so slightly more than we have. But on top of our work then, we've got a roughly £1.5 million capital budget for resurfacing, and roughly £600,000-700,000 budget for doing bridges and assets. So you can see from them figures, roughly 2.5 million, that we're a long way behind the £4.5 million that we need to be investing in to get a steady state on our roads. So this new money coming in is lovely. We welcome it. We would like to see this every year. We would like to see it being highways budgets propped up like this every year. But even at those levels, we are only just going to be managing over a steady state. So no further deterioration would be nice for everyone. But at some point, it would be nice to get in front of the curve and start making real improvements in the network. It's estimated at around 55-60 million to bring all the roads up to a good standard on the budget that we've got. Currently that's around 20 years, and in that 20 years the roads would have failed twice. So it gives you an idea of where we are and how difficult it is to get on top of things. And I don't say this glibly. I know you are on the front line. I know how much stress and grief you get through emails as well, because I feel it when you send them on. So I know what you're doing, and take a lot of that off the people. And I'm not sure it's something I'd want to do, is be on that front line taking that when actually you don't control the work either. It's quite a difficult place to be. I'm glad it's you, not me. But yeah, I really do appreciate you and the community councillors that come to me and ask for work to be done. I appreciate how difficult it is for all of you in managing people's expectations, especially with our budget at the current levels.
Thank you, Carl. So also, thank you. Francis, if you've got any, you are allowed.
I was only going to say, Chair, I think what would be really helpful is to understand who we could write to in Sutra or Welsh Government, or just to raise some of these issues of clarification between responsibilities and how unrealistic it is for the local authority to be responsible for some of these things on trunk roads. I mean, it would be helpful if, we might not want to discuss that further now, but it would be helpful if we could have some of that information, perhaps about the best way to escalate some of the concerns we have, because clearly, we're going round in ever decreasing circles sometimes trying to find out, who's responsible for what. But the way you've set out some of the responsibilities and some of the strange decisions about what is a trunk road and what isn't, it is also equally perplexing and probably not helpful for anybody, particularly not members of the public or us or yourselves. So thank you, Carl.
And just to add to that, as I said at the beginning, we have a very good relationship with them now, and I think that's partly brought about two Welsh authorities facing down the issues that we had with National Highways in the early stages of Leys Bend, and it felt a bit like that. Much better relationship now with them. I think, if I asked them to come in and do a scrutiny meeting, or potentially even come into one of the highways workshops with us, I think they'd be very happy to do that now, and that'd be a chance to, put them on the spot, so to speak, understanding their budgets as I do now. I'm not as critical as perhaps I once was, because I can see the bigger picture of the struggles that they've got and the challenges they've got as well. But it's nice for you to hear it and look them in the eyes and understand that as well.
On that theme of looking in the eyes, thank you, Carl. I mean, some really good points. Francis, I know you've probably got another supplementary to the supplementary, but you can come in later because I want to add to what you've just requested this committee to do by writing a letter to Sutra, because I think it's a really good idea and you made some good, valid points, which I think has consensus support from the meeting. Steve, you're in the meeting as well, so welcome to the meeting. Mary Ann was at the meeting at the back, but I didn't know. I couldn't see her in a public gallery until she was found out because her phone went, and now she's gone, so she wouldn't make a very good burglar, put it that way. So we've got, next up on the agenda, we've got, or to speak, we've got Jill. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation, Carl. Really good. Thank you. Appreciate all that you do and your team do, and now we understand a bit more of the challenges you've got and how frustrating for you as well as ourselves, as you've explained, and thank you for appreciating that we get a lot of flack as well. And thank you for being open and honest and answering any questions we've got. I think you've mentioned before, did you mention, but also we've asked before for a workshop about highways work, less use of cutting and less use of chemicals and all the things I think you've got one planned. Is that open to all of us, please? That's the first question. So that'd be brilliant if we could all be part of that. Second one is, you said there's no legislation for littering. I wonder whether we could be used, or we could take it upon ourselves to raise that as an issue along with the Sutra questions you've just been Francis just been talking about. And does it help in elsewhere in England possibly? Does it actually solve anything to have the legislation about people throwing out litter out of their windows? And the other question is around, you mentioned about the closure of the bridge, and you've got better communications now, but of course it's dependent on weather and can be last minute decisions. I wonder if what would be the effect if they did downgrade the M48 so that we could have a exit off there and alleviate some of the traffic going through Mega and through Chepstow then, to avoid the M48 bridge being shut. So just wonder if there's any conversations about that. I know there's discussions in Welsh Government, but I don't think they've actually committed to it yet. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
So the legislation part, Wales hasn't adopted throwing rubbish from a vehicle as whilst they see it as a crime. There's no legislation to allow us to prosecute at the moment. So I think it does help in England. The risk of getting caught is a deterrent. I am hoping that the new deposit return scheme will at least mean people keep the plastic bottles and the cans and all in their car until they get a place where they can take them back and get their deposit back for them. So I'm hoping it will reduce it somewhat with that. Not everything is covered by the deposit return scheme, so we're still going to have litter, but hopefully less of it on the roads. We've pushed for Welsh Government to legislate and allow us to prosecute off the back of that. So it's on their agenda. It was one of the things that they were looking at just before COVID, and then COVID came with an all new raft and Brexit and an all new raft of legislation changes, so it got pushed back slightly. I don't know where they are with it, but we can chase that up. The M48, Deb is going to cover kindly for me, and the member seminar will be open to everybody. So the plan is we'll do a member seminar on highways. We will cover off at length how the BRAG system works and the matrix for that, so all members understand how it works. May not agree, but that we can at least share that and explain how it works for when they have conversations. Yeah. And we're also covering off a litter members workshop at the same or around the same time. So we'll cover both things at member workshops. They are interlinked.
And that links into Nature Isn't Neat, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Deb, I was just going to suggest, I'm certain, because I'm one of them, and I suspect Dale probably will be, and he's next up speaking, we will have a number of questions about the M48 specifically, so if you want to cover those off collectively at the end, if that's all right, if that's all right with Jill, if she's prepared to wait for and then you can come in with other questions as well later. Is that all right, Jill? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Councillor Rook.
Thank you, Chair. When it comes to 7 bridge closures, this is an observation, pretty much. Sutra closed the bridge at the junction, Thornwell Junction, to bring traffic off. In those times when you're able to still use the bridge, they then direct the traffic back onto the bridge into a single lane. This causes huge problems at Thornwell roundabouts for local residents seeking to leave the motorway and get home. Is there any justification as to why that happens? And also, we've got some safety barrier issues that have been ongoing for a number of years, well over a year. Any signs of when those might be replaced? Thank you.
So those are more questions about the M48. Shall we wait for, if you're happy and patient to wait for them, because we can all pile in at the end if you want, Dale, or do you want to cover that off now, Deb?
I think some of those are actually going to be Carl.
Carl, okay.
To relate to Sutra.
Okay, so do you want to, because I want to come at the end, yeah, and I don't want to then repeat, or so I'm just accommodating myself. Are you all right with that, Dale, or you can come in later? Are you all right with that, Carl? Yeah, brilliant. Tony, Councillor Kerr.
Thanks very much, Chair, and can I just echo the comments also made, Carl, for that presentation. I think communication to members is key, and I think what you've started to lay out and you've highlighted with the other workshops that are going to be coming on brag and litter picking, etc., is going to inform us much better and give us the opportunity then to explain that to our residents. Because ultimately, I think if they are aware of where certain roads lie in the priority list and the reasons why, that's going to assist us on that front line. Because yeah, we do get it not just on emails, Carl. We also get it when we walk in the street and we're having a drink in the pub, when we get accosted on a Saturday night. What are you doing about this pothole? A couple of questions, if I could. What is the council's view on voluntary litter picking groups operating on the road as well? Because clearly you've talked about safety there. One of the regular questions I get, and I'm sure we could all name examples, is the quality of the potholing repairs, how that marries in with the need to quickly repair them for obvious reasons. And then that linked into me was actually trying to understand the repair process. So, for example, we put something in on the MyMon app. What happens when it gets the other end? How does it get prioritized? And as I said, and I'm very grateful for the work that's ongoing at the Three Salmons Junction. But when we get the same pothole repaired 3 times in 3 weeks, that appears to members of the public as being not good value for money. And my final question, if I'm right, there is a legal process, if that's the right phrase, a legal time frame from which you get notified about a pothole repair and when you have to repair it by. Is that correct? It's a number of questions. Sorry, Carl.
No, that's fine. I'll try and cover them off. The prioritisation of the network for us is more, as I explained, more complex. There is a lot of factors in there, more than just the state of the road. It's how that road is used and what other works are programmed in that area. We don't want lots of roads closed in a single area. You know, any members in Monmouth will bear witness to the problems that caused with, you know, and the works by Welsh Government were much needed. Other works have to carry on as well, but it does cause a problem when everything is centralised into a small area. So there's lots of things in the prioritisation of the works. Porthy Carn Street is scheduled for this year's work. The Geist surveys 3 years ago, it wasn't at the top of that priority then. We recognise that roads deteriorate faster than others, but we have to have somewhere to start. We are looking at doing the Geist surveys now, a third of the county every year, so that we've got more up-to-date data, constantly up-to-date data. So we recognise some of the issues that causes, but unless you've got a base to start at, the prioritisation tool doesn't work, and then SEU shouts loudest gets the work done regardless of safety or anything else, and that isn't the right way to prioritise the network for maintenance. So we're conscious of the changes that we're making to make things better. Once we've got an idea of the funding for this year, we're happy to share that with all members. I'm happy to share it with the public. As I said, the network, you know, if I step outside my door, there's a pothole outside my door, that's the most important pothole to me. If I drive around the corner and there's two big potholes, they become the most important to me, and so on. And we have to manage that expectation of the public, but we do recognise there are some roads, heavily used roads, that everybody uses, and they are problematic. And Porthy Carn Street has deteriorated much quicker than we wanted it to, and now needs to be fully resurfaced. So that work will go ahead next year. So if you send a message in that there's a pothole, in the first instance, we'll try and get a team out there. We'll put some Ecitech in it. That's the cold pothole fix. As long as no one drives over it straight away, it will last. It doesn't last forever, but it will make make the all safe. And that is our primary function, is to make the network safe. So that's the material we use. Difficult junctions, and I'll use Porthy Carn Street because that's got a little bit of mix of everything. It's quite a busy little town, and it's got a junction there, and there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of heavy vehicles moving over it. Ecitech doesn't last long in those circumstances, but closing the road to dig it out and patch it is a full scheduled piece of work and impacts a lot of people and needs to be thought through properly. We wouldn't want to patch that corner when the rest of the road needs to be done. We want to do it all in one go. So we recognise that Ecitech is not always the best solution, but it is the fastest, quickest and easiest solution for us. It stays cold on the back of the vehicle. We can carry it around with us. Hot tarmacking is the next step up from that. Hot tarmac will last a lot longer. You could put it in a hole. It will last, in some circumstances, it lasts longer than the road around it, which can also become a problem. But we can't carry hot tar all the time. We certainly can't carry hot tar in the night when we're out on calls with people phoning in going, there's a large pothole, come onto my road. We need to do it in a material that we can easily transport, and that's Ecitech type material. So we are doing a lot more hot potholing now, last year and this year. We're doing a lot more of the small schemes last year and this year. We were lucky enough to have a £1 million budget over capital budget, over additional £1 million capital budget over 3 years. So we've done a lot of patching works, and they are quite big patches, you know, 30 to 100 ton type patches. Llangibby, I'm picking on areas where you'd be well
appreciated.
Yeah, but the Llangibby, the two stretches in Llangibby I think the total cost of them was something like 60, 70 grand to do those patches. That gives you an idea of the amount we spend on this. So, you know, £300,000 doesn't go very far either when you're doing that larger patching work. What it's done is meant our road it will last many years to come, you know, and that's really where we want to be. We want to get in, do proper work, proper patching work that makes the road better. Doesn't just put a bit of tarmac into an hole that we know is probably going to fail in 3 months, 6 months. It's a proper job, sealed, proper surface put down, but it costs, and it needs to be scheduled into the thing. So those works are happening. We want to do more of that. This LGBI funding will allow us to do some more of that as well. It is more about the big structures and the big resurfacing projects with the LGBI funding, but what it does is hopefully free up more of our budget to do the small patching type works, and that is where the majority of complaints from members come, is those smaller schemes. It's outside Mrs Jones's door, outside Mrs Williams's door, not the A40 or the A48, because you know there's an expectation that we will pick them up as par for the course. It is the more local stuff, Porticarn Street, where we get the most complaints. So hopefully I've covered. Oh, the litter picking, sorry, the volunteer. Obviously massively grateful. We've got around 250 to 300 volunteer litter pickers. The county wouldn't look anywhere near as good as it does if we didn't have those in place. So I'm forever grateful to the litter champions. The advice we give is to litter pick on the slower roads. Certainly we wouldn't encourage any litter pickers, and we've told many groups not to go on to the Sutra roads, the A roads, the trunk roads. Please stay off them. If we're not allowed on them without traffic management, I don't want others on them without traffic management either. It's difficult. We're a rural county. A lot of our litter champions pick the country lanes. They are 60-mile-an-hour roads. Lots of them haven't got pavements. We tell them to be safe. We tell, but they are walking them lanes anyway with their dogs, and all is what they tell us. We walk in the lane, we've got a litter picker with us. We'd rather do a bit of litter picking. So from our perspective, we'd rather it more urbanised litter picking for them, which frees up our teams to go out and do the difficult roads and the faster roads. But for many of our litter pickers, they live in rural communities and they want to keep their direct community clean. They don't want to travel from Trellock into Chepstow where it's safer to do litter picking. They want to litter pick around Trellock and those areas. So, and I understand that. That's their community. That's what they want to do. But we do provide the IVs. What we can do, and if it's a big litter pick, we will try and provide traffic management. We've done a couple on Lydats coming out of Monmouth where we've provided some traffic management and then worked with the litter champions to do that work, which works really well. Bigger workforce for us, and knowing that they're safe in a controlled area. But we can't do it for everybody picking on a 60-mile-an-hour road. So, but very, very grateful for them doing it, because it does make a huge difference to us.
Chair, can I just have one follow-up, if I may, which I think is for everybody? Could you just go into a little bit more detail about this local borrowing initiative? How does that scheme work? Is it borrowing? Does it have an impact on having to be repaid? Could you just explain that a little bit further?
I wish I fully understood it all myself. Basically, yes, it's borrowing, and Welsh Government repay the loan on our behalf out of our money. Yeah, Deb will explain it better than me, Councillor.
So, thank you. The Local Government Borrowing Initiative has been brought in by Welsh Government, where they are providing the headroom for borrowing. So essentially, they identify for each local authority the percentage of the funding that's been made available and how much money they will then transfer to local authorities to pay back that borrowing over a period of time. So we'll be paying it with funding that is being provided to us. and it will be paid over a number of years. So the funding that we will have available largely is in this year, and then there's a smaller amount in next year. The process is that even though they've allocated or ring-fenced an amount of funding that is made available to us, we still have to apply with the projects that we are intending to use that funding for. Carl's team has submitted that application, and we're now awaiting their decision.
Thanks very much, Deb. So the repayment period is interesting for me because, Carl, you've talked about a 10-year life cycle of a road. Are we likely to be borrowing this money over longer than 10 years or shorter period?
I would anticipate it's probably around that area. We haven't actually got the complete figures yet, but I would anticipate it's around that period of time.
Okay, thank you very much, Deb and Carl, and thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Tony. Good questions. Penny, you're next up. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Carl. It's a really interesting presentation today. You know, it's good kind of questions we've all got and, you know, apply to all of us. So thank you for that. I've just got a couple of questions, but first of all, I'd like to thank you for acknowledging the role of community councils, because the community and town councils play quite a large part in highway issues, don't they? You know, they're often referred back, and certainly I'm a member of a community council that is heavily involved. But no, I'm not going to mention Raglan Bypass today. Carl, you'll be pleased to hear. Okay, I'll just leave that. My two questions are, the bridges, as for example, bridges over a trunk road, over the A449, for instance, some of which are in really bad state of disrepair. Who is responsible for that? They're on our lanes, on our roads, but they're actually over the trunk road. But, you know, some of them are really quite dangerous. How do we get those repaired? Is it through Sutra, or is it, you know, will they use our workforce? I don't know how that would work. That's one question. And the second question is just a generic one. How, very difficult to assess, I know, but how is our performance, Monmouthshire County Council performance, how does it compare to other local authorities? Do you think we are managing better than some, you know, especially our size or a rural area? Or, you know, are you worried about it? Well, I know you're worried about it, but does it seem to be worse than other local authorities?
But how worried are you, Carl?
I'm always worried.
Yes.
From the bridge perspective, it's not as easy as it's either Sutra's or it's ours, because a lot depends on when the road went in, what we agreed to take back as our maintenance things. Some things long before my time, certainly on the bigger trunk roads, but I'm aware that now on the edge of the Valley Road, we're going through that process of them handing back the side roads and some of the bridges back to us as an authority, and we are pushing back on that now, going, no, that bit of work isn't finished, that isn't done, you've got to bring it up to a certain standard, almost like the housing development type conversations that we have. I can't answer for all the bridges. From my perspective, if you tell me that the bridge is looking shabby or becoming dangerous and it's above one of the A roads, our first thing is to try and push it onto Sutra for them to fix. The bridge wouldn't be there if the road wasn't under it. And that's the kind of logic that we try and use and try and push everything back to them as this stays. It's not that simple. There are drawings of what we've taken on, but in general, we take the view that if it's going over or under one of their roads, it's their responsibility to keep it fixed. So, yeah. From a worried perspective, you know, the state of the roads are not good. Worried from an officer perspective that we don't have enough money to maintain our network. Is our network any worse than others? I did a big bike ride yesterday, and I'm really struggling today because of it. I probably went through 4 or 5 counties yesterday, and none of the roads are particularly better or worse than ours, and I did a good mix of roads. I come out of Cardiff along Lambie Way and up the coast road, and they are in a pretty poor state for what is our capital. But I also understand they're industrial estate roads as well. So I don't think we're any worse than anybody else, particularly. But it does worry me the general state of the network across the UK, but particularly in Wales. It is, I was down Swan. I'm not picking out councils because I understand the challenges they've got, but I do a fair bit of cycling, and you get a real feel then for the state of the roads because you're pedaling on them rather than driving on them. So yeah, across the board, it's not a great scene.
Thank you, Carl.
No, thank you, Penny, for those questions, and thank you, Carl. Steve, you're next up. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say to Carl, thanks for all the work you do, and you do yourself an injustice because you did stand on the Mono Bridge with me when we had the roadshow for the Lees Bend thing. So you were public facing there, taking, it right there in the firing line. Thank you. Monmouth has gone through quite a lot recently with the Welsh Waterworks, and currently we've got the tunnels going on with the contraflow system and the current contraflow system at Lees Bend. It is managing okay. It was a bit sticky this morning going towards Midlands. So, I just wonder how Sutra are monitoring traffic flow and ensuring that, I know they've got the tow trucks at the old toilet lay-by, which are available, but we did recently have a blockage on the bridge over the Y, basically a lorry just turned in the corner. I don't know whether it broke down, but it caused chaos for like 3 hours, I think. So I'd just like to know a bit more about how Sutra are kind of monitoring and managing the traffic flow situations around Monmouth with the current situation. Another issue that's arisen is to do with their tree felling activities, because when they were doing the traffic lights at the junction of the Wide Bridge, they felled a load of trees overnight. They also felled trees near the tunnel at the back of Beach Road. As local members, we don't seem to be notified of these kind of activities, and then we get residents contacted as well. Why are these trees being felled? They have gone in and put new tree planting in at the back of Beach Road and along on the stretch jointly in Town Ward, but those residents have lost that protection. So again, we know lack of consultation. So hopefully, what you've said about Sutra maybe coming along in the future will help with consultation. And also, in my area, we've got Staunton Road and the Link Road. Thanks for your work on Staunton Road, because there was a leak for about 1.5 years, which was causing serious damage on the bend, and that stopped. And thank you for you and your team for getting that resolved, along with Councillor Bryn as well. We all kind of worked together on that. Also, we've got the Link Road as well, which I understand is due for at some point repair, and I wonder when that might be a timetable for that. But with Staunton Road, that's a long-term issue. I know a lot of the heavy traffic comes from the quarry up in the forest. Are we able to work with the Forest of Dean District Council about any assistance there? Because a lot of their traffic is being generated from their area and industrial areas, and that's causing a lot of wear and tear, which obviously we're going to end up picking up as a council, aren't we? So I was wondering what kind of work we're doing with the Forest of Dean as well in terms of liaising with them as well. Great, thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
So I'll cover Staunton Road in the first instance, and Staunton Road is a big project. We've got a lot of design works going on at the moment. We've had some costings back, and the most cost-effective position at the moment. These are eye-level figures, but I need a fair bit more work. But you're looking at £15 to £18 million to do the bottom section of Staunton Road. So it's a lot of money needed to fix that road. We have done some works at the top with the water. We've just in the process of hopefully finished doing the junction at Kimmin Junction, because there was water coming out of there. We're seeing new springs coming up, and they're finding their way down. I believe the one at the Kimmin it found its way down through some BT trunking, and when it got to the bottom of the BT trunking, it decided it needed to come out into the road, and that's what caused the push up in Kimmin Road. And so it's nothing within our control, but by default we're the people who need to send in teams to sort it out, and it all costs and adds to the money. So Staunton Road is a good example. It's probably used as much by Forester Dean as it is by us, if not more. The network wasn't designed for the kind of vehicles that we run on the network now, whether that's on our main roads or our lanes. And you know, a lot of the more rural councillors in rural areas that have the large tractors going up through and the large lorries going up through to service the farms, we've all got to eat. I'm not complaining about that. So, but it does take a belting on the roads on that network. And I think, you know, the lorry getting stuck going over Wye Bridge is a fine example of why Bridge wasn't really designed to take large lorries over it. It was probably designed for horse and cart at best. And then you've got Staunton Road, which is in the same kind of place. The more we run these large lorries, the more damage it is to the roads and the more cost we're going to have to do to keep it going. That said, you know, we want industry, we want jobs, we want economy, we want people coming in to visit us, so we've got to do that work. We've got to keep those roads up to a good standard. I'll speak with Sutra about what they're doing to make sure the roads are flowing. They do as much as they can. We have a much better, you know, you'll be very aware the relationship with them is far better now. As you said, I stood on the bridge with National Highways and discussed with many members, many residents about the work at Leys Bend, and most of my day was spent talking about Welsh Waterworks and local roads rather than Leys Bend. So being out and being available for people is always good. It's finding the time sometimes to do it. But yeah, it is important to us. Sutra now is beginning to recognise how important their roads are to our local communities. And I think in the past they've just thought, this is our road, we'll do what we want on it because it's our road, without really taking on board the impact it has on the communities directly off that road. And I think Monmouth highlighted that for everybody. You know, it doesn't take a lot to shut a town down. A little bit of work by Welsh Water shouldn't have brought the town to complete standstill. But when you throw in Leys Bend and other bits of work and a bit of tree chopping, yes, it can bring an old town down to its knees. So I think we all recognise that now and want to get better at it. The works bringing down the trees by the car park, the trees were rotten, they needed to come down. Sutra have apologised for the lack of communication on that and agreed that they will put some additional planting in there as a bit of a sound barrier, but the trees needed to come out. When we seen the traffic order, it just said road closed for traffic lights and ancillary works. We don't know what ancillary works were. We didn't realise that there were some trees coming out, or we would have passed it on. So National Highways have just had a few requests in about trees coming down further on their section. It's actually one of the forestry people taking all the trees out. It's got nothing at all to do with the work. But we recognise that anything that happens along the side of an highway suddenly becomes an highway issue. So yeah, the further up is nothing to do with us. The works before Gibraltar tunnels, there was a lot of dead ash in there. They just used that opportunity to get it out. But they've recognised they should be telling people these works are part of that work, because people worry that we're just jumping on the back of road closures and doing what we want, and that clearly that wasn't the case. So hopefully I've covered them all, Councillor.
Steve, are you satisfied? Have you got any supplementary, Steve?
Yeah, just one quick one. It was as Councillor Kerr mentioned about the app, and I just wondered. I mean, I use it regularly to report potholes, and I feel the communication's good because you get a report that's been acknowledged, you get a report to say it's been actioned or sent to somebody in a different team. So I just wondered what we could do more. I know as councillors, I'm sure we all try and do our best to encourage people to use it, but it is a useful tool, and it helps you to their prioritised work. And I wonder what we could do more, that we could get more publicity out, more comms out to encourage residents. I know the council tax letters went out recently. There might have been an opportunity to put something in there just to kind of encourage residents to use that app, and they can take a photo if it's safe to do so, and log it on the map and everything, and then gives your team a chance to focus. So yeah, what can we do more to get the app usage up maybe?
anything that you can help with getting the app usage up is good news to me. Hopefully would be good news to you as well, because it will save your inboxes slightly. I'm conscious that a lot of it is around this type of stuff. If people report it directly, in theory, if you report a pothole in the north of the county, it goes to the north of the county team, and they're best placed to go out and fix that pothole quickly. If they send an email to you, you send it to me, I send it to someone else, and then it finally gets to the team, and there is a lot of time spent in between our trail. You know, my inbox is constantly full. I'm conscious that it can take me a week to get to an email. By then that person has probably emailed you again and said nothing has been done about it. You've emailed me again and it still hasn't got to the people that need to do the work. So I think encouraging everybody to use the app would be a good idea, and I think we're going to have another push on that again now with Paul Sullivan's team to get more people using the app. Conscious that in the past the responses haven't been great. The timeline of response is not great, but when everybody's using it, it should get better. And I think if they put it on MCS and they haven't seen any progress in it, they want to get hold of you or want to get hold of me, that's fine. It can be chased up. But in the first instance, if they can put it on the right system, at least it'll give the system a chance to work.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carl. We're going to go back now to, are you happy with that, Steve? Are you satisfied? Yeah, excellent. So we're going to go back to originally Jill's questions and Dale's questions, because what I tried to do is cajole, stick these kind of questions together. So if I'm right, Jill, your question would be, what would be the effect of downgrading the M48 to alleviate traffic through Mega and Chepstow when the M48 bridge is shut? Am I right? That was your question there, Jill?
Downgraded so that they can put a junction on it, yes.
Yeah, thank you. And then Dale's question, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is why does Sutra close the Thornwell Junction and then direct traffic back onto the bridge into a single lane, causing issues for residents? When will the safety barriers, this is the $1 million question, when will the barriers that have been an issue over the 7 years be replaced? So am I right in thinking those are your questions, Dale? Yeah. So my question is on the back of that is in part to obviously the closures around the Severn Bridge, the Prince of Wales Bridge is being partially closed for renovation work, pushing traffic then onto the M48, which has got a 50 mile an hour speed limit on it. I know many drivers find that frustrating. I do. Our attempts then to communicate as councillors with Sutra, I've spoken just before, Carl, has been poor, and they're effectively saying that it's a financial issue and they need to replace those barriers because those barriers are so old that they do need to replace, so consequently they need to, from a health and safety perspective, need to reduce then the speed limit. But looking at barriers elsewhere, possibly then just over the other side of the bridge, I would say that some of those barriers are similar, but there's no evidence of them being replaced, or certainly not any mindful kind of reduction of the the speed limit down to 50 mile an hour. And I think on the back of Dale's question then is the traffic that is effectively coming from Newport towards England over the old Severn Bridge. What is often the case is prior to a closure, you're then having what they call an up and over scenario, where they force the traffic off the Severn Bridge onto the New Housefout roundabout, which is effectively the exit for the A466, down then back onto the Severn Bridge, which caused massive problems then for anybody approaching Chepstow or trying to get out to Chepstow, or effectively then trying to get to Bristol. Now, the broader context of that is that, I know Carl knows this because we've had this discussion, is that everybody in Chepstow works, well, not everybody, but a large proportion of the population, Caldicott and Chepstow and Mega, work over on the other side of the bridge, and I believe it's an economic hotspot because it's got around about 9,000 jobs. So that gives you a broader picture of the sometimes often chaotic pictures of distress you see of drivers in the morning. And then, as you rightly point out, Carl, many of the residents then approach us because they can't get in contact. They don't know who to get in contact with, so we then have to manage people's expectations, which is almost an impossible task. The other question is I'm not entirely sure what our relationship is with Sutra, if Sutra are actually doing this, because it seems to me this is a peculiar thing that it's in fact it's English Highways that are doing it. So I'm not aware of any legislation that allows English Highways to close off basically at the entrance to the Severn Bridge. So is it Sutra managing that? And if it's English Highways, and on what legal premise are they closing and creating this up and over, which, as I say, is causing significant problems. So sorry to pitch in with some really heavy questions there. Have you got any idea what's going on at all, Carl?
Not complete ideas, but I'll get the information back to you on that. In general terms, from a traffic management perspective, you take the vehicles off the road and put them over a roundabout and out into a single lane to save them coming at speed and then bunching up when they're on the bridge. So you slow the traffic down further back and divert it to get it flowing into a single lane at the easiest point. I'm not sure that is the best solution of putting it up onto that bridge, given that we know how heavily trafficked that roundabout is. So I'll certainly speak to them about that and see if there is a way of pushing it out when the Leys Bend. And I'm going back to this, but when the Leys Bend happened, the Dixton roundabout was the easiest place before the Dixton roundabout to put people into a single lane, and that is the right thing to do. That is traffic management chapter 8. That's the new version of chapter 8. That's the right way to do it, but it caused that many problems in Monmouth that we managed it and pushed the traffic management out beyond Dixton roundabout. So whilst it may be the best guidance for the main part of the road, the impact on the other roads also needs to be considered. So I'll take that back and see if we can put the road narrowing beyond the roundabout onto the bridge, or at least between the roundabout and the bridge, to get it down into one lane. The only difficulty for that is people coming off the roundabout from Chepstow are entering a single lane of traffic on the M48, which would be very difficult for them to enter. So it's around traffic management issues and getting the traffic to flow as freely as possible on the M48. Yeah. Their concerns are not always about the impact on the other sections of road just off there, and that's something that these monthly meetings will hopefully address with them, because we can flag up where the issues are for us as a council and as our communities, which in the past they haven't always been great at understanding. So certainly a point that I'll take back to them for Councillor Rook, and I will come back with a fuller response when I've got an answer to it. Yeah,
thank you, Carl. Thank you for answering those questions. My only supplementary is to add in is they also feel that it's a responsibility to, this is English Highways now, I assume, also manage the A466. So as Dale probably knows, and anybody that's trying to, get to Bristol or use the traffic, they're now managing traffic as you approach the M48, so the dual carriageway is down to a single carriageway, and I'm not entirely sure whether it's their responsibility or what relationship they are allowed, so what the agreement is with Sutra to allow them to legally operate in I know it's not the Berlin Wall, we try to cooperate. It's important that all agencies cooperate and work together, but I'm still not entirely sure whether or not you're going to find out about it or we're going to find out about it, because if Sutra don't know they're doing it, how are they going to tell us? Does that make any sense? Because I know we don't get any feedback from English Highways unless there's a kind of they tell us they're going to do some work on the Severn Bridges over the next 6 months, but that's it really. We don't know how they're going to approach that, say for example the roundabouts or the A466. So sorry to go into a little bit of detail there, but it's something that haunts me on a week-to-week basis from emails coming in. So hopefully now with a new relationship that you're forging ahead with communication with Sutra, you'll be able to find some of this out. But I guess what I was hoping to do is that we could extend then the letter that we're going to write, which Francis had indicated she'd like us to do, which I think we're all in agreement with, we could extend then to also asking those questions then in part where it's appropriate to English highways. Does that make any sense? How does everybody feel about that? Yeah? Is that a consensus? Steve, you're looking slightly puzzled there. Is that okay? Yeah? No? Penny?
Yeah, for clarity, I'm sure that the legalities are all in, are all above board. I'm sure it must be. I can't imagine, such massive undertakings going on if we weren't allowed to do it. But let's get clarity on it.
Yes.
What they can and can't do.
Yes, yeah, lovely background by the way today. Very spring-like and very Welsh. I do like that. Dale and Jill are both. So, Jill, I noticed you're in the same field as Dale this morning as well. Jill, if you want to, if you'd like to come in with your question there, Jill.
No, it was just the additional. I did mention about the supporting the legislation, which Carl mentioned that he is continuously encouraging the Welsh government to implement about littering.
Yes, thank you, Carl.
That should be in that letter as well, please.
Carl, does that seem reasonable to you, Carl? We don't want to step on your toes or make life any more difficult than it already is.
No.
Is that okay?
That's fine by me. The bridges are managed by National Highways as opposed to Sutra, so we work closely with them on they work closely with them on the road closures. I'm sure it is all done legally. I'm sure all that is covered off. But there is that disconnect often with work by National Highways impacting on the Welsh side of the border, and in the past it's been difficult with Sutra to get them to understand that it impacts our communities. It's even more difficult then with National Highways, but for that area we have a lot better working relationships with the Midlands branch because of Leys Bend. I'm sure we can extend that to the Bristol branch of National Highways as well and start working more closely together.
Yeah, sorry. So on your behalf, Jill, I'm going to come back to you. What would be the effect of downgrading the M4 to alleviate traffic through Meagher and did you cover that, Carl? Oh, Deb, you're going to do that. Brilliant.
Thank you. In terms of the M48 and the declassification and the potential for a new link road, that's something that came out, not the declassification, but the new link road came out of the South East Wales Transport Commission, one of the recommendations for Lord Burns, and it's part of the work that we've been promoting through the Burns Delivery Group. It remains as one of the aspirations for Monmouthshire County Council within the Burns prospectus. We've raised it with Welsh Government officials. We've also raised it with the Cabinet Secretary. There was an initial response a while back saying that they did not want to look at declassification of the M48 because of the implications of any diversions. We continue to push back on that and challenge that. And in a recent meeting with the Cabinet Secretary, they were very clear that if we want to continue to promote this scheme, it needs to feature within the Regional Transport Plan and the Regional Transport Delivery Plan. It is in the draft that is currently out for consultation. We'd absolutely love as many members of the public as possible to go back to the consultation and respond that they would like to see that in there. If that becomes part of the final document, that will give us the ability then to continue to lobby to get that M48 link road built. We'd like to see it declassified first because the cost implications on declassifying it and building that junction are substantial. There's a substantial saving if it becomes declassified. So we are continuing to promote that. We're also promoting it as part of the WellTag study that's currently underway on the High Beach roundabout and how having the link road on the M48 would enable residents in the Roggett, Meagher and Caldecott areas to use that rather than again having to funnel them all the way up to High Beach roundabout to get on the M48 and then onto the Severn Bridge. can I just take this opportunity as well? I just wanted to clarify a response I gave to Councillor Keir earlier. I've just checked the guidance on the LGBI. The borrowing term is actually 20 years. So I've just been able to clarify that now.
No, thank you, Deb. I mean, you've obviously kind of covered that there. Sorry, Dale did have a question to you, Colin. Sorry to put you on the spot because I know this is something that you're going to. I've kind of answered that in my question, but I'm sure that Dale would want this to be thoroughly kind of addressed because I know it's something that Dale's spoken about many times before, certainly in other meetings. So when will the safety barriers that have been an issue be replaced?
I'm not sure when they're scheduled, but I will find out and come back to Councillor Rook when we've got a more firm answer. Yeah. I know that I've been asked that question for the Raglan section that is 50 miles per hour, and the response that I've had is it's not in this financial year, and that is as clear an answer as they could give me on that. The vehicle restraining systems that they used are older now. They do need to be replaced. They reduce the speed because at 50 mile an hour you'll bounce off it. At 70 mile an hour you may go through it. Is roughly what the issue is with it. They've got a schedule of repairing these barriers, but I don't know where it is on that schedule at the moment. But I will try and get the most robust answer back, albeit not in this financial year. It doesn't answer a lot of the questions that probably residents are posing to you. But at least you'll have had something.
I guess it's the culture, it's the theme really, isn't it, of that culture of fairly opaque answers really you get from Sutra, which is become quite tiresome. I can see you, Joe. So I guess we would like an answer because, it's like saying, well, will it happen within the next, before the next millennium, or, when will it happen really? So someone needs to kind of clarify what on earth is going on there, because frankly, I think most people using it are just frustrated. Anyway, I'm going to tell that off, but Jill, you did want to come in at the end.
Just to say thank you very much, Deborah. And so you're saying we must all respond to that transport survey and make sure it becomes higher in the list for Welsh Government. And yes, and could you, Carl, respond to all of us that are along that corridor, M48 corridor, not just Dale, please, so we can tell our residents. Thank you.
Yeah, Dale, you want to come in?
A question to Carl. Following the cutting down of the trees in Monmouth, when do you think that ancillary works needs investigating a bit further, to just in case, as you said, another body needed to be involved, like ecology or something? Thanks.
So the majority of the trees that were brought down in front of Gibraltar tunnels, all of the ecology was in place. All of that work had been done, is my understanding. We try not to get too involved with all of these projects. It's difficult to keep on top of our own, so try not to get drawn into too many other people's workload. But we do come back, and certainly for members in Monmouth at the time, we did go back and check some of this detail out. The trees in question that probably caused the most furore were 3 cherry trees that the residents had planted 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and the cherry trees were rotten in the centre. They were on a verge, there was in some brambles. I'm not sure of the level of ecology studies that were done in that area, but the trees were potentially going to fall into the road, and they were that rotten. So they would have just come out under an emergency notice while they were working on that section. But they were much loved trees rather than a large clump of trees, and they were planted by the residents. So what we want to try and do is come back in then and plant some more. We've asked them, will they work with us in planting some more trees there that are not going to grow as high as to impact on the road, and will provide better biodiversity on that section. So yeah, we'll get some benefits out of this one, but I do appreciate that for members, wherever it is, not just Monmouth, but when works happen on the side of the roads and lots of trees are taken out, and then we are publicly saying that we want to plant more trees, and planting trees is a good thing for biodiversity, and then all of a sudden we come and take out thousands of trees along a motorway, the vast majority have been because of ash dieback and the risk they pose to the road user. So, but the ecology is done on those bigger places. It normally, for that scale, requires a felling licence as well, so all goes through NRW. So.
Happy with that, Dan? Excellent. Are there any other questions on this? Jill?
I was just going to say, is there a way, I've just put it in the chat as well, is there any way you could give that feedback to the local members or to share so there's no misunderstanding? Because obviously if people are getting animated and upset, they might not have realised that the cherry trees were rotten. So is there any way we can increase the feedback loop, improve it, possibly? Thank you.
During the works in Monmouth, because of the problems it caused, we had a regular catch-up with Monmouth members. We had a Teams channel running all the time, trying to keep everybody informed of everything that's going on. So yeah, we have explained that back. And where we have, where we have particular issues, the fire in Abergavenny is another example. We set up a Teams channel with members and stakeholders to try and manage that noise and control that communication level, because we realise that everybody wants to know as much as possible about things, and if there's a gap in communication coming out, people fill it with nonsense. So yeah, we try and fill the gaps as best we can on this.
I understand it must be difficult. I was thinking of the castle in Caldecott particularly. Thank you.
No, thank you, Jill. Listen, guys, I think that's it. I think we've kind of exhausted this issue now, and I'm grateful for Deborah and Carl's attendance. But we do have one final thing, which we've kind of partly, thanks to Tony, covered a little bit of, but I think the direction of it is slightly different. Potholes. So number 5 on the agenda would be potholes and repairs, to provide the committee with oversight of how recent monies allocated to the councils and the UK government will be spent in Monmouthshire. Carl.
And as I said at the beginning, that is slightly more difficult for me to answer in a fuller thing of where the roads are, what roads are going to be fixed and what we can do, because we haven't had the allocation of money yet. So until I'm reasonably comfortable that the bid that we've put in for the LGBI funding will be approved, but until it is, I don't want to fill people with false promises of work that's going to happen and then have to come back and go, really sorry, that isn't going to happen now, because that is equally difficult to manage for me as it is for you as members. So I can't give an absolute answer on that. What I can say is this year we will be putting more money into hot potholing, and we will be doing more hot potholing. There will always be a need for cold potholing. There will always be a need for an emergency fix. We're never going to get away from that. Whatever system we employ, we have to carry some material on the back of the vehicle that is cold and can just be put in an hole as a temporary fix just to make the road safe. What we want to do is get to a point where we're able to go back and make that a more permanent fix. At the current rate of deterioration, in an ideal world, we would go out, we'd put a cold mix in, a couple of days later we'd come back, either patch it or we'd just hot pothole it, depending on the size and the complexity of the fix. What we don't have is enough staff to keep going back because we're constantly chasing our tail. So with this additional funding, we're hoping that we can catch up with that. We will certainly cover all of this off in the workshop. We will have a section on the LGBI funding. We'll have a section on the matrix of how we prioritise. And as I said, there's no perfect solution to this. The A roads cover 4% of the network. I can't put 4% of the funding into the A roads because you won't have any A roads left. So it can't be done just on the percentage covered by the network. It can't be done just on how important the road is to Mrs. Jones or Mrs. Williams or whoever, because another part of the road services a lot more people. But I'll cover that off. I'll cover off how we do the fixes, what we're looking to improve. And I know Councillor Key is keen on the Pothole Pro and the system that uses. We've tried that, but we'll show what equipment we already have and what we're trying to do with that equipment, and if we had enough money, what we would like to do. And hopefully part of that will be covered with this LGBI funding. When I know how much money we've got, that's when I'll set up the workshop. But I'm hoping that's going to be, end of April, beginning of May, and we'll go into a lot of depth. We'll set some proper time out. It won't be death by PowerPoint. It'll be death by questions from members, and we'll work with you. We want to deliver a service that doesn't fill your inboxes, because when your inboxes are full, mine is full. So, we want to get better at it. We'll listen to you and what you're suggesting, and we'll take that away and try and build it into the service. And a lot of it does come down to communication. If we can keep everybody communicated with, even if the answer is no, at least they'll understand why the answer is no. And hopefully at some point the answer will be yes to more people, because we'll have that additional funding.
Thanks, Carl. Deborah, have you got anything to add to that?
No.
Sorry to frighten you there. Guys, have we got any questions on those specific points? No? I've just got one, Carl, because I'm just been on the authority a long time, and I know you've tried to cover that off, and it's a cheeky question, because you'll say, well, look, we're gonna try and approach this in a workshop, but I'm sure other members, to be fair, Penny probably will get this, is that there used to be a time many years ago we used to be able to phone up highways, and then because I think you mentioned about broadly speaking, about managing people's expectations. This is the business we're in, managing people's frustrations, disappointments, and aspirations. So there used to be a thing called a schedule of works, and people used to they say, well, highlight then the schedule of works. Now, I'm not aware that the schedule of works went away, but I'm not sure that it still exists, if that makes sense. So are we going to get to the point where we will have some form of schedule of works then from a regional perspective, so we kind of know we can highlight then and say, look, we're terribly sorry, but the work will commence, we hopefully commence in, say, the end of the financial year, or it's been delayed because of, and it takes some of the pressure off you then, Carl, because you're going to get a phone call off me or Dale or Steve or whoever it is, Penny, on a Monday morning, really frustrated because we've had an earful over the weekend. What do you think about that?
So once we know what the funding situation is for this year, what I'd like to do then is at least make members aware of the list of works that are going ahead this year through the workshop, but also we'll email it out. You'll have an idea then of the bigger works that are going on. You'll have an idea of the small patching, small improvement works that are going on. All that will be listed.
Yeah.
If you phone me up on a Monday morning and say, Carl, this road has collapsed, that road, a sinkhole, a culvert has collapsed, that road will be bounced up that priority list because it needs to be fixed immediately. That's the area where it's more difficult to say what we're doing. The maintenance work, there is so, and I know that members and residents don't always believe me, but there is so much work going on in maintenance, you wouldn't want to know. It'd just fill your inboxes to the point where that's all you would see is highways works going on. I think last month there were 200 pieces of work going on across the network, and we don't have I'd spend all my time resourcing telling people what we're doing rather than being out doing what we need to get done. But I think for the bigger jobs, certainly you'll have a schedule of works this year. You'll have an idea then of what is in the pipeline for the year after, albeit we have another storm Bert or another named storm, that priority could change. Sure. So yes, you'll definitely have a schedule of works this year. Yes, we'll definitely discuss it at the workshop. What you bring to the workshop then will help us become better at managing that communication with residents, which hopefully takes a bit out of your inboxes as well, for the year going forward. Does that answer the question?
It does, absolutely. Have we got any more questions then from other members? No? None at all. I'm going to ask you again, are there any more questions from other members? No? Tony, no? No, everybody?
No.
Excellent. Right, so I'm going to turn up. Look, thank you, Carl and Deb, for coming along. I mean, I just want to say this publicly. I mean, these people are very busy. For the officers to come in here at relatively short notice, taking two hours of their working day out is basically is quite difficult for them, because it means that they're probably working into the evening. So I want to say thank you on behalf of the committee for coming along today. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Carl. You remain the fans' favourite. I'll let you get on with the rest of your day. Cheers.
Thank you all.
Right. So next on the agenda, so we've got the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 10th of February 2005.
Yeah, so do members approve that as a true and accurate record of the meeting, please? If so, can we have a nomination and a seconder? Thank you.
I've got the seconder, yeah? Yeah, two. All right, we got Malcolm and we got Dale. Thank you both councillors. So, number 7 on the agenda is Public Services Committee Forward Working Plan or Work Plan.
Hello members, we've talked in the pre-meeting about the work programme, and I did update you briefly on where we are with some of the items, but if you have any further discussion you want to have on it today, then please feel free.
Are there any questions about the Forward Work Programme? No? We mentioned obviously what we aspired to do, there's some of the themes we're looking to kind of cover going forward. Are there any other kind of, does anybody want to look beyond that or want to fill in, or do we require any? Jill, I can see your hand up.
So we discussed about perhaps broadening the discussion about mental health services for adults to perhaps concerns about suicide prevention or occurrence and prevention. And also I mentioned about changes to domiciliary care, and maybe people and services could get together on that. Mm-hmm. And I think Hazel's taken account of this, and the Bevan Unitary Health Board improvements to the combined approach to care. So that might be people and ourselves as well, because it's services. Yeah,
I think Penny made a really good point earlier, that it's not to request then officers to kind of talk about children's social care and adult social care in one meeting. Well, that meeting would probably take, if I'm honest with you, longer than some of our full council meetings. So we Penny was very wise, obviously being the former portfolio holder, and said, look, let's just focus on a specific issue, which is obviously our concern about the welfare and mental health of those people that could potentially then be at risk to themselves and to other people, and so on and so forth. And what I mean by that is obviously the heightening risk of then suicide amongst middle-aged people and younger people in our community, which is something we're really concerned about. It's difficult out there, isn't it, for many people. So I know that many of you've talked about this to me or to other officers, and it's a concern amongst all our communities, particularly in rural areas, which Penny rightly pointed out as well. So that's what we're going to cover. That will be on the work programme, and I look forward to a good discussion on that. Are there any other issues on there? Are there anything that you want to adjust, amend? Is there any other kind of, I'm going to ask you again the same question. Is there anything? No? Okay. So number 8, the council and the cabinet work planner.
For noting, Chair.
Just for noting. And so the date of the next meeting, if everybody's happy with that, is the 11th of May at 10 a.m. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah? So I look forward to seeing you. Thank you all for coming along. There's been some... Malcolm, are you... Thank you. Oh, you just... Yeah. Saying thank you. I'm here. Yeah, thank you, Malcolm.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yeah.
It's the 11th of May.
Sorry, the 12th of May.
Sunday. You can work on a Sunday, Chair, but
I'm always happy. I've been
might be busy, to be fair.
You used to work on a Sunday, so I'm not frightened. If you guys want to come in on that on the 11th, I won't be here because it was a mistake. It's going to be the 12th of May. I do apologise. So it's the 12th of May at 10 a.m. Is everybody happy with that?
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming along today. Great questions. I really enjoyed the meeting today. I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Chair.
Hazel.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Hazel.
Thank you, Chair. Good meeting. Thank you.
Bye-bye.